Good morning, everyone. We are the group 5. We are going to discuss the topic about why the future doesn't need us.
Why the future doesn't need us. According to Bill Joy, our most powerful 21st century technologies, robotics, genetic engineering, and nanotech are threat. The new Luddite challenge. First, let us postulate that a computer scientist succeed in developing intelligent machines that can do all things better than human beings can do to them. In that case, presumably all work will be done by vast, highly organized systems of machines and no human effort will be necessary. Either of two cases might occur. The machines might be permitted to make all of their own decisions without human oversight, or else human control over the machines might be retained. If the machines are permitted to make all their own decisions, we can make any conjectures as to the results, because it is impossible to guess how such machines might behave. We only point out that the fate of the human race would be at the mercy of the machines. It might be argued that the human race would never be foolish enough to hand over all the power to the machines. But we are suggesting neither that the human race would voluntarily turn power over to the machines, nor that the machines would willfully seize power. What we do suggest is that the human race might easily permit itself to drift into a position of such dependence on the machines that it would have no practical choice but to accept all the machines' decisions. As society and the problem that face it becomes more and more complex and the machines become more and more intelligent, people will let machines make more of their decisions for them, simply because machine-made decisions will bring better results than man-made ones. Eventually, a stage may be reached at which the decisions necessary to keep the system running will be so complex that human beings will be incapable of making them intelligently. At that stage, the machines will be in effective control. People won't be People won't be able to just turn the machines off because they will be so dependent on them that turning off would amount to suicide. On the other hand, it is impossible that human control over the machines may be retained. In that case, the average man may have control over certain private machines of his own, such as his car or his personal computer, but control over large systems of machines will be in the hand of a tiny elite, just as it is today, but with two differences. Due to improved techniques, the elite will have greater control over the masses, and because human work will no longer be necessary, the masses will be superfluous, a useless burden on the system. If the elite is ruthless, they may simply decide to exterminate the masses of humanity. If they are humane, they may use propaganda or other psychological or biological techniques to reduce the birth rate until the mass of humanity becomes extinct, leaving the world to the elite. Or if the elite consists of soft-hearted liberals, they may decide to play the role of good shepherds to the rest of the human race. They will see to it that everyone's physical needs are satisfied, that all children are raised under psychologically hygienic conditions, that everyone has a wholesome hobby to keep him busy, and that anyone who may become dissatisfied undergoes treatment to cure his problem. Of course, life will be so purposeless that people will have to be biologically or psychologically engineered either to remove their need for power, process or make them sublimate their drive for power into some harmless hobby. These engineered human beings may be happy in such a society, but they will most certainly not be free. They will have been reduced to the status of domestic animals. In the book, you don't discover until you turn the page that the author of this passage is Theodore Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Kaczynski's dystopian vision describes unintended consequences, a well-known problem with the design and use of technology, and one that is clearly related to Murphy's law. Anything that can go wrong will. Our overuse of antibiotics has led to what may be the biggest such problems so far: the emergence of antibiotic resistant and much more dangerous bacteria. Similar things happened when attempts to eliminate malarial mosquitoes using DDT caused to them to acquire DDT resistance. Malarial parasites likewise acquired multi-drug resistant genes. The cause of many such surprises seems clear. The systems involved are complex, involving interaction among and feedback between many parts. Any changes to such a system will cascade in ways that are difficult to predict. This is especially true when human actions are involved. The short run. Biological species among never survive encounters with superior competitors. 10 million years ago, South and North America were separated by a sunken Panama Isthmus. South America, like Australia today, was populated by marsupial mammals, including pouch equivalent of rats, deers, and tigers. When the isthmus connecting North and South America rose, it took only a few thousand years for the northern placental species, with slightly more effective metabolisms and reproductive and nervous systems, to displace and eliminate almost all the southern marsupials. In a completely free marketplace, superior robots would surely affect humans as North American placentals affect South American marsupials. Robotic industries would compete vigorously among themselves for matter, energy, and space, incidentally driving their price beyond human reach, unable to afford the necessities of life. Biological human race would be squeezed out of existence. There is probably some breathing room because we do not live in a completely free marketplace. Government coerces non-market behavior, especially by collecting taxes. Judiciously applied governmental coercion could support human populations in high style on the fruits of robot labor, perhaps for a long while. A textbook dystopia, and Moravec is just getting wound up. He goes on to discuss how our main job into the 21st century will be ensuring continued cooperation from the robot industries by passing laws decreeing that they be nice, and to describe how seriously dangerous a human can be once transformed into an unbounded super intelligent robot. 3. Moravic's view is that the robot will eventually succeed us. The human race clearly face extinction. Accustomed to living with almost routine specific breakthroughs, we have yet to come to terms with the fact that the most compelling 21st century technologies, robotics, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology, pose a different threat than the technologies that have come before. Specifically, robots, engineered organisms, and nanobots share a dangerous amplifying factor. They can self-replicate. A bomb is blown up only once, but a robot can become many and quickly get out of control.
The vision of near immortality that Cruzwell sees in his robot dreams drive us forward. Genetic engineering may soon provide treatments, if not outward cures, for most diseases, and nanotechnology and nanomedicine can address yet more ills. Together, they could significantly extend our average lifespan and improve the quality of our lives. Yet, with each of these technologies, a sequence of small, individually sensible advances leads to an accumulation of great power and concomitantly great danger. What was different in the 20th century? Certainly, the technologies underlying the weapons of mass destruction: nuclear, biological, and chemical. We are powerful and the weapons of enormous threat. But building nuclear weapons required, at least for a time, access to both rare, indeed, effectively unavailable, raw materials and highly protected information. Biological and chemical weapons programs are tended to require large-scale activities. The 21st century technologies, genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics are so powerful that they can spawn small new classes of accidents and abuses. Most dangerously, for the first time, these accidents and abuses are widely within the reach of individuals or small groups. They will not require large facilities or rare raw materials. Knowledge alone will enable the use of them. Though we have the possibility not just of weapons of mass destruction but of knowledge-enabled mass destruction, this destructiveness usually amplified by the power of self-replication. Given the incredible power of these new technologies, shouldn't we have be asking how we can best coexist with them? And if our own extinction is a likely or even possible outcome of our technology development, shouldn't we proceed with great caution? The dream of robotics is, first, that intelligent machine can do our work for us, allowing us lives as leisure, restoring us to Eden. Yet in his history of such ideas, Darwin among the machines, George Dyson warns, in the end of life and evolution, there are three players at the table: human beings, nature, and machine. How soon could such an intelligent robot be built? The coming advances in computing power seem to make it possible by 2030. And once an intelligent robot exists, it is only a small step to a robot species, to an intelligent robot that can be evolved copies of itself. A second dream of robotics is that we will gradually replace ourselves with our robotic technology, achieving near immortality by downloading our consciousness. It is this process that Danny Hillis thinks we will gradually get used to and that Ray Kurzweil elegantly details in the age of spiritual machines. We are beginning to see intimations of this in the implantation of computer devices in the human body. Genetic engineering promises to revolutionize agriculture by increasing crop yields while reducing the use of pesticides, to create tens of thousands of novel species of bacteria, plants, viruses, and animals, to reproduction or supplement it with cloning, to create cures for many diseases, increasing our lifespan and our quality of life, and much, much more. We now know with certainty that these profound changes in the biological sciences are imminent, that will challenge all our notions of what life is. Technologies such as a human cloning have in particular raised our awareness of the profound ethical and moral issues we face. If, for example, we were to re-engineer ourselves into several separate and unequal species using the power of genetic engineering, then we would threaten our notions of equality that is very cornerstone of our democracy. Awareness of the dangers inherent in genetic engineering is beginning to grow. As reflected in the Levin's editorial, the general public is aware of and uneasy about genetically modified foods and seems to be rejected the notion that such foods should be permitted to be unlabeled. But genetic engineering technology is already very far along. As the Levins note, the USDA has already approved about 50 genetically engineered crops for unlimited release. More than half of the world's soybeans and a third of its corn now contain genes spliced from another form of life. Understanding the future, the nanotechnology revolution, which Dexler could write, imagines some of the changes that might take place in a world where we had molecular level assemblers. Assemblers could make possible incredible low-cost solar power, cures for cancer and the common cold by augmentation of the human immune system, essentially complete cleanup of the environment, incredibly expensive pocket supercomputers. In fact, any product would be manufacturable by assemblers is a cost no greater than that of wood. Space flight for accessible than transoceanic travel today and restoration of extinct species. The enabling breakthrough of assemblers seems quite likely within the next 20 years. Molecular electronics, the new subfield of nanotechnology where individual molecules or circuit elements should mature quickly and become enormously lucrative within this decade, causing a large incremental investment in all nanotechnologies. Unfortunately, as with nuclear technology, it is far easier to create destructive uses of nanotechnology than constructive ones. Nanotechnology has clear military and terrorist uses, and you need not to be suicidal to release a massively destruction nanotechnology device. Such devices can be built to be selectively destructive, affecting, for example, only certain geographical area of a group of people who are genetically distinct. An immediate consequence of the Faustian bargain in obtaining the great power of nanotechnology is that we run a grave risk. The risk that we might destroy by biosphere on which all life depends. As Dexler explained, plants with leaves no more efficient than today's solar cells could outcompete real plants, crowding the biosphere with inedible foliage. Tough omnivorous bacteria could not compete real bacteria. They could spread like blowing pollen, replicate swiftly, and reduce the biosphere to dust in a matter of days. Dangerous replicators could easily be tough too, small and rapidly spreading to stop. At least we have to make no preparation. We have trouble enough controlling viruses and fruit flies. Among the cognoscenti of nanotechnology, this threat was become known as the gray grow problem. Though masses of uncontrolled replicators need not to be gray or gooey, the term gray goo emphasizes that replicators able to obliterate life might be less inspiring than a single species of crabgrass. They might be superior in an evolutionary sense, but this need not make them valuable. The Great Goat threat makes one thing perfectly clear. We cannot afford certain kinds of accident with replicating assemblers.
Grey goo would surely be a depressing ending to our human adventure on Earth, far worse than mere fire or ice and one that could stem from a simple laboratory accident. It is most of all the power of destructive self-replication in genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics that should give us pause. Self-replication is the modus operandi of genetic engineering which uses the machinery of the cell to replicate its designs, and the prime danger underlying grey goo in nanotechnology. Stories of run-amok robots like the Berg replicating or mutating to escape from the ethical constraints imposed on them by their creators and are well established in our science fiction books and movies. It is even possible that self-replication may be more fundamental than we thought and hence harder or even impossible to control. A recent article by Stuart Kaufman in Nature titled Self-Replication, Even Peptides Do It discusses the discovery that a 32 amino acid peptide can autocatalyze in its own synthesis. We don't know how widespread this ability is, but Kaufman notes that it may hint at a route to self-reproducing molecular systems on a basis far wider than Watson-Crick base pairing. In truth, we have had in hand for years clear warnings of the dangers inherent in widespread knowledge of GNR technologies, of the possibility of knowledge alone enabling mass destruction. But these warnings haven't been widely publicized, the public discussions have been clearly inadequate, and there is no profit in publicizing the dangers. The nuclear, biological, and chemical are NBC technologies used in 20th century weapons of mass destruction, where and are largely military, are developed in government laboratories. In sharp contrast, the 21st century GNR technologies have clear commercial uses and are being developed almost exclusively by corporate enterprises. In this age of triumphant commercialism, technology with science and its handmaiden is delivering a series of almost magical inventions that are the most phenomenally lucrative ever seen. We are aggressively pursuing the promises of these new technologies within the now unchallenged system of global capitalism and its manifold financial incentives and competitive pressures. This is the first moment in the history of our planet when any species, by its own voluntary actions, has become a danger to itself, as well as the vast number of others. It might be a familiar progression transpiring on many worlds, such as a planet newly formed placidly revolves around its stars. Life slowly forms, a kaleidoscopic procession of creatures evolves, intelligence emerges which, at least up to a point, confers enormous survival value, and then technology is invented. It dawns on them that there are such things as laws of nature, that these laws can be revealed by experiment, and that knowledge of these laws can be made both to save and to take lives, both on unprecedented scales. Science, they recognize, grants immense powers. In a flash, they create a world-altering contrivances. Some planetary civilizations see their way through, place limits on and what must not be done, and safely pass through the time of perils, while others, not so lucky or so prudent, or perish. We should have learned a lesson from the making of the first atomic bomb and the resulting arms race. We didn't do well then, and the parallels to our current situation are troubling. The effort to build the first atomic bomb was led by the brilliant physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was not naturally interested in politics but became painfully aware of what he perceived as a grave threat to Western civilization from the Third Reich. A threat surely grave because of the possibility that Hitler might obtain nuclear weapons. Energized by this concern, he brought his strong intellect, passion for physics, and charismatic leadership skills to Los Alamos and led a rapid and successful effort by an incredible collection of great minds to quickly invent the bomb. What is striking is how this effort continued so naturally after the initial impetus was removed. In a meeting shortly after VA Day with some physicists who felt that perhaps the effort should stop, Oppenheimer argued to continue. His stated reason seems a bit strange, not because of the fear of large casualties from an invasion of Japan, but because the United Nations, which was soon to be formed and should have foreknowledge of atomic weapons. A more likely reason the project should continue is the momentum that had built up. The atomic test trinity was nearly at hand. We know that in preparing this first atomic test, the physicists proceeded despite a large number of possible dangers. They were initially worried, based on a calculation by Edward Teller, that an atomic explosion might set fire to the atmosphere. A revised calculation reduced the danger of destroying the world to a 3 in a million chance, Teller says. He was later able to dismiss the prospect of atmospheric ignition entirely. Oppenheimer thought, though, was sufficiently concerned about the result of Trinity that he arranged for a possible evacuation of the southwest part of the state of New Mexico, and of course there was the clear danger of starting a nuclear arms race. Within a month of that first successful test, two atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Some scientists had suggested that the bombs simply be demonstrated rather than dropped on Japanese cities, saying that this would greatly improve the chances for arms control after the war, but to no avail. With the tragedy of Pearl Harbor still fresh in Americans' minds, it would have been very difficult for President Truman to order a demonstration of the weapons rather than use them as he did. The desire to quickly end the war and save the lives that would have been lost in any invasion of Japan was very strong. Yet the overriding truth was probably very simple. As the physicist Freeman Dyson later said, the reason that it was dropped was just that nobody had the courage or this foresight to say no. It's important to realize how shocked the physicists were in the aftermath of the bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. They describe a series of waves of emotions. First, a sense of fulfillment that the bomb worked, then horror at all the people that had been killed, and then a convincing feeling on no account should another bomb be dropped. Yet, of course, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki and only 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima. In November 1945, 3 months after the atomic bombings, Oppenheimer stood firmly behind the scientific attitude, saying, "It is not possible to be a scientist unless you believe that the knowledge of the world and the power which this gives is a thing which is of intrinsic value to humanity, and that you are using it to help in the spread of knowledge and are willing to take the consequences." Oppenheimer went on to work with others on the Atchison-Lilienthal report, which, as Richard Rhodes says in his recent book Visions of Technology, found a way to prevent a clandestine nuclear arms race without resorting to armed world government. Their suggestion was a form of relinquishment of nuclear weapons work by nation states to an international agency. This proposal led to the Baruch Plan, which was submitted to the United Nations in June 1946 but never adopted. Perhaps because, as Rhodes suggests, Bernard Baruch had insisted on burdening the plan with conventional sanctions, thereby inevitably dooming it. Even though it would almost certainly have been rejected by the Stalinist Russia anyway. Other efforts to promote sensible steps toward internationalizing nuclear power to prevent an arms race ran afoul either of U.S. politics and internal distrust, or distrust by the Soviets. The opportunity to avoid the arms race was lost and very quickly.
2 years later, in 1948, Oppenheimer seemed to have reached another stage in his thinking, saying, in some sort of crude sense which no vulgarity, no humor, no overstatement can quite extinguish, the physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge they cannot lose. In 1949, the Soviet exploded an atom bomb. By 1955, both the US and the Soviet Union have tested hydrogen bombs suitable for delivery by aircraft. And so the nuclear arms race began. Nearly 20 years ago, in the documentary The Day After Trinity, Freeman Dyson summarized the scientific attitudes that brought us to the nuclear precipice. In 1947, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist began putting a doomsday clock on its cover. For more than 50 years, it has shown an estimate of the relative nuclear danger we have faced, reflecting changing international conditions. The hands of the clock have moved 15 times at today, standing at 9 minutes to midnight, reflect continuing and real danger from nuclear weapons. The recent addition of India and Pakistan to the list of nuclear powers has increased the rate of failure of the non-proliferation goal, and this danger was reflected by moving the hand closer to midnight in 1998. In our time, how much danger do we face? Not just from nuclear weapons, but from all these technologies. How high are the extension risks? The philosopher John Leslie has studied this question and concluded the rest of human extension is at least 30%, while Ray Kurzweil believes that we have a better than even chance of making it through, with the caveat that he has always have been accused of being an optimist. 9. Not only are these estimates not encouraging, but they do not include the probability of many horrid outcomes that lie short of extension. In Engines of Creation, Eric Drexler proposed that we build an active nanotechnological shield, a form of immune system for the biosphere to defend against dangerous replicators of all kinds that might escape from laboratories or otherwise be maliciously created. But the shield we propose would itself be extremely dangerous. Nothing could prevent it from developing autoimmune problems and attacking the biosphere itself. Similar difficulties apply to the construction of shields against robotics and genetic engineering. These technologies are too powerful to be shielded against in the time frame of interest. Even if it were possible to implement defensive shields, the side effects of their development would be at least as dangerous as the technology we are trying to protect against. These possibilities are all thus either undesirable or unachievable or both. The only realistic alternative I see is relinquishment to limit development of the technologies that are too dangerous by limiting or pursuit of certain kinds of knowledge. We have been seeking knowledge since ancient times. Aristotle opened this metaphysics with a simple statement: all men by nature desire to know. We have, as a bedrock value in our society, long agreed on the value of open access to information and recognized problems that arise with attempts to restrict access to and development of knowledge. In recent times, we have come to revere scientific knowledge. But despite the strong historical precedents, it opened access to an unlimited development of knowledge, henceforth puts us all in clear danger of extension. The common sense demands that we re-examine even these basic long-held beliefs. It was Nietzsche who warned us at the end of 19th century not only that God is dead, but that faith in science, which after all exists undeniably, cannot owe its origin to a calculus of utility. It must have originated in spite of the fact that the disutility and dangerousness of the will to of truth at any price, is proved to it constantly. It is this further danger that we now fully face the consequences of our truth-seeking. The truth that science seeks can certainly be considered a dangerous substitute for God, if it is likely to lead to our extension. If we could agree as a species what we wanted, where we were headed, and why, then we would make our future much less dangerous. Then we might understand what we can and should relinquish. Otherwise, we will easily imagine an arms race developing our GNR technologies, as it did with the NBC technologies in the 20th century. This is perhaps the greatest risk for one such a race begins. It's very hard to end it. This time, unlike during the Manhattan Project, we aren't in a war, facing an implacable enemy that is threatening our civilization. We are driven instead by our habits, our desires, our economic system, and our competitive need to know. New Pandora's boxes of genetics. Nanotechnology and robotics are almost open, yet we seem hardly to have noticed. Idea can be put back in a box. Unlike uranium or plutonium, they don't need to be mined and refined, and they can be freely copied. Once they are out. Churchill remarked in a famous left-handed compliment that the American people and their leaders invariably do the right thing after they have examined every other alternative. In this case, however, we must act more presently, as to do the right thing only at last may be to lose the chance to do it at all. The clear conclusion was that we would create additional threats to ourselves by pursuing these weapons, and that we would be more secure if we did not pursue them. We have embodied our relinquishment of biological and chemical weapons in the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention (BWC) and the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention (CWC). As for the continuing sizable threat from nuclear weapons, which we have lived with now for more than 50 years, the U.S. Senate's recent rejection of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty makes it clear relinquishing nuclear weapons will not be politically easy. But we have a unique opportunity with the end of the Cold War to avert a multipolar arms race, building on the BWC and CWC relinquishments. Successful abolition of nuclear weapons could help us build towards a habit of relinquishing dangerous technology. Actually, by getting rid all but 100 nuclear weapons worldwide, roughly the total destructive power of World War II, and a considerably easier task, we would eliminate this extension rate.